Who will be the next mayor of Maui County? Retired Judge Richard Bissen topped current mayor Michael Victorino in the primary election, but with less than 40% of registered voters casting ballots, the majority of voters have yet to make their choice. From housing to over-tourism to dealing with climate change, the plans these candidates have to manage Maui County. Tonight's live broadcast and live stream of Insights on PBS Hawaii start now.
Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Daryl Huff. Tonight we have the remaining two candidates for Maui County Mayor joining us. They were the top two vote getters out of a field of 8 in the primary election in August. We look forward to your participation in tonight's show. You can email or call in your questions, and you'll find a live stream of this program at pbshawaii.org and the PBS Hawaii Facebook page. Now to our guests. Richard Bissen is from Kahului and spent 30 years as an attorney and judge in Maui County, serving as chief of the Maui Circuit Court until he retired in 2021. Before becoming a judge, he was a first deputy in the State Attorney General's office. Mike Victorino is from Wailuku Heights and is the current mayor of Maui County. Prior to being elected mayor, he served for 10 years on the Maui County Council. He is a former youth sports coach and director of the Maui County Fair. And Mike, we'll start with you. And I'll ask you both the same question. After your time as being mayor, what now is the first priority you want to attack if you win this election?
If I win this election, the first thing I'll attack will be housing, which we're already in the process. And the other area is infrastructure. Green infrastructure is very important for Maui County. That's why the $1 billion budget is made to make these things come to fruition. We've kicked the can down the road for so many years. And so now it's very important to get infrastructure going. Creation of our diversified economy is number 3.
Let me just stop you for a second, because I'd like you to go back to your first priority, because that's what I'm asking about.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. So what different would you do about housing?
I don't think I'd do much different, because with the pandemic, it stopped us and slowed us down tremendously. Now we are recovering. Our supply chains are getting better. The unions as well as the developers are really wanting to work on Maui to make sure that we have housing. And, I think we are really on a good path. Bill 107 is also another part where we have restricted the amount of the payment that anyone has to pay for their house in the 80% and lower income bracket. So a lot of good things are happening, and we've got 5,000 units in the pipeline. We're building 742 right now. I'm feeling very good that housing being a top priority is being achieved right now.
Okay, Richard Bissen, what about you for top priority?
Well, for sure, housing is important, but I think for us, what's going to be important in the next 15 to 25 years is water. For us to have housing, we need to make sure our water system is up and running and we have it enough to do that. So I think taking control of our water and making sure we can manage that correctly is going to be a priority. When it comes to housing, we want to approve 100 accessory dwelling units in the first 180 days of our campaign. That is the quickest and the cheapest way to build housing for us right now, today, because we have the existing infrastructure, Daryl, in those locations, people's homes. And again, accessory dwelling units is across the state. All the councils, county councils have approved this. So I feel like that's the quickest way we can get people into homes. And again, our plan is to have pre-approved floor plans for a studio, 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, and to pre-approve those and have people who will hook up to the water and the county sewer to get those built, and again, in the quickest way.
Let me follow up on housing with you, Mr. Victorino. There seems to be some kind of a NIMBY effect sometimes on Maui, where the people will say, we need affordable housing, but you can't put housing there because it's a flood zone, or you can't put housing there because it's something else. Is that something that needs to be overcome? Do people have to get used to the idea that there will be new construction and more houses near their neighborhoods?
It is very necessary to get more housing built. Existing infrastructure and effective commercial buildings are more costly to remodel and redo. In fact, in many cases, it's cheaper to tear it all down and build from scratch again. Water is an issue, but the issue of water really remains more in the East Maui and West Maui aquifers and the development of water systems. But going back to my first response with housing, we need to build, and in some areas, go up 4 or 5 stories, a little more vertical than all sprawl. And I think a lot of people agree to that because we can have more infrastructure built and accommodating these units and not as costly. And so the county is committed, on our administration to bring the infrastructure to the project boundaries and let them build from there.
Any other housing initiatives you have in mind?
Well, again, to answer your question, though, there has been a study done, and one of the things, when we talk about building houses on Maui, the 2 issues that come up is where to build it and who will buy that, who will be in that house. So not just building affordable housing or houses that, we're basing it on eligibility or the cost. What our plan is kama'aina housing, which is to get residents into those houses, people from Maui. Building affordable housing and selling it to someone else who's not from here does not solve our problem. And that's what we need to focus on, I believe. And so our platform is based on kama'aina housing. And again, one of the short term I talked to you was accessory dwelling unit. The benefit of building it on existing vacant commercial property is that there's existing infrastructure already there. Water, sewer, parking, and of course locations that they're at. I think there are developers willing to look into these types of restructuring and repurposing. I don't think we should come in with an attitude that we can't do it. I think we should come in with an attitude that we can and find those solutions because that's what people want. That's what our residents want. And as far as your question about where to build those inventory of lands, they've been identified in some communities. The central Maui, Waikapu area, there's going to be lots of building coming up there. South Maui, West Maui. There are already places that have been identified.
Okay, let me move on to the water issue, though, again. It strikes me that, for a long period of time up country, they were forced to conserve water because of all kinds of mechanical problems and stuff up there. Is the water infrastructure, appropriate for the needs up there? And I know that there were also complaints that, the resorts have water, but we don't have water. What are you doing to address that, Mayor?
Well, there are 2 separate systems. We have the central water system, which serves all of South Maui into all of Central Maui. West Maui has their own system. Upcountry has their own system. The upcountry system has been 80% surface water. So just about every summer, especially lately, we've had extreme droughts. Water has become a real issue. And so one of the things we have done is we are starting to develop wells that we, the county, should be developing, not developers. And also working together to make sure that the water that's coming in from other sources like East Maui and other places is being used judiciously and for the purpose of our residents and farmers alike in the upcountry area.
How do you feel about the structure of the water system and the quality of the infrastructure?
Well, obviously, infrastructure has to be reviewed. I mean, we have 76 miles of water transmission that goes from East Maui that comes into the upcountry area, and those lands cross private lands, government lands, but that maintenance of that is something that the county, if the county decides to take over the water system, is going to have to be responsible for. So we know that infrastructure, that maintenance, that there is work that should be done on that. With regard to water, though, as I said earlier, this is going to be the issue that we confront in the next 15 to 25 years for sure. And we need to be thinking in terms of generational thinking, not 2 years and 4 year thinking. We need to think in terms of 2 and 4 generations down the road, how we're going to deal with that. And so what I think we should be doing...
Can I interrupt, though? What's the challenge, though? Is there not enough water, or is there just no infrastructure? And how much investment does that require?
I'll answer it this way. The people live in one place and the water is in another place. So one of the things we should consider doing is developing water sources for drought-prone areas and heavily populated areas. That would seem to make sense. And that's something I guess we're talking about tonight and thinking about doing. But this is not a new problem. This is not something that has just happened on Maui. This has always been the case. We have a rule on Maui that you can't have be on the county water system and have catchment. Why that is because of backflow issues. But that's only if you connect on the same line. We should allow for there to be 2, a catchment system, so in times of drought, people who have catchments can use their water for their animals, for their garden, for their cars, and still have potable water. So, I mean, again, not new issues.
But we have the issue where the permits are taking forever because that's an upcountry issue also, right? And how much have you done during the last 4 years to address that issue?
Well, there's the upcountry water meter list, which was developed back in the late 80s, early 90s. And still today, they're still working on that because we have like 2,000 plus on the list. In the past 3 years, we've been able to give a little over 325 new water meters. That's a start, but not near as much as we need to get. And a lot of it is the improvement of the system. And one of the other things is now looking at how we can work together to make sure that when we put 1 meter here, that all the infrastructure that has to go there, at one time we had proposed in the council to share cost. And that worked really well for a little while, but then some of the council members and the mayor didn't like the idea at that time, so they changed it back. So we need to go back and look at some of these issues and see what we can do. But this has existed for the last 50 years, and now that EMI and A&B are trying to divest themselves of the water system, we've got to make sure that we have a water authority to manage not only East Maui, but all of the Maui County water systems.
Okay, I'm starting to get questions from our viewers. Thank you very much. This was John from Kihei. What do you think about reducing the number of rental cars on Maui to lessen traffic? That also starts us walking toward the issue of over-tourism. But I remember when there weren't any rental cars on Maui for a while ago. Mr. Bissen, what do you think about that idea? Rental car regulation of population to a certain extent.
I think if we're going to talk about rental cars, what we need to be doing is focusing on electric cars. I think what we should be doing is having a discussion with the rental cars about maybe 25% of their fleet going electric. If we're going to have the cars at all, they should be those types of cars. Before we can eliminate all of that, though, we need to come up with a county-wide policy on our public transportation. We do have public transportation, but perhaps we can increase that to allow for the tourists to use more of those shuttles between hotels from the airport. Again, we should increase that. We should be looking at, we have a system that we're developing in our campaign of driverless vehicles. I mean, we're not developing the technology, but there are people working on it right now at UH Maui College. And again, autonomous vehicles is actually what they refer to, and we can have those.
Just to get specific, so it sounds like what you're saying is you'd like there to be fewer cars transporting tourists all around.
Yes.
And a greener situation.
Absolutely.
Mayor, your thoughts about that?
We've already started on that process, and we've had our first 6 hybrids, which use electricity and diesel to charge electric batteries, so we have to have the infrastructure. That's the bridge to getting more electric vehicles.
Buses?
Buses, yes. These buses are open to everyone, including our visitors. And so we are trying to increase the amount of buses in these resort areas so people can catch the bus and go to town or go to the beach or go where they want to go without being taxing our roadways. I remember the day when you drive to Lahaina and you wouldn't see so many cars, but you'd pass 2 or 3 big buses loaded with visitors going to their destination, staying at the destination, taking tours out of that destination, that resort, and enjoying. So yes, I think we can start working towards that. Electrifying our fleet, we're already starting that with the county, and a lot of people are buying electric cars, but we are putting the EV chargers in so that they can utilize it. And so this is part of our whole master plan of electrifying our fleet at buses and our vehicles within the county itself.
Judge Bissen, do you have the electrical charging infrastructure in place if you had that many rental cars that needed to be charged?
Well, that's why we need to work on the infrastructure part of it. As I was saying, before we eliminate the rental cars and reduce them, we should have more public transportation that allows for our visitors to get around, or increase the electric vehicles that we're going to have. And that's going to necessitate having more charging stations. But the real benefit, Daryl, is, rental cars, what happens is when they start to sell their fleet, they usually sell it to the local population. So what that does is it converts our local population over to more purchasing electric vehicles as well. And that's really what we want to do over time under my administration, is to have electric vehicles, not just in the county's fleet, in people's homes. And again, people are a little reluctant to buy them initially, but the cost, and of course there are tax benefits to doing so, but we need to build up the infrastructure. And again, I think it starts partly with your question with rental car companies.
Mayor Victorino, here's another, Jackson from Kihei. What is your plan on working on the backlog of permits for affordable housing on Maui? Is there a backlog of permits for affordable housing on Maui?
Not on the affordable housing area, because we have been expediting that. Our new Maui automated planning program, MAPS we call it, is now taking hold, where you as an individual, a contractor, a developer can go online and check what status your particular project, house, extension, whatever, is at any given point. It's automated so that you don't have to come in, you don't have to call, you get online and you check and you see where everything's at. So that's one step. We also want to redo our ordinances, because many of our ordinances and policies were built back in the late 60s and early 70s, are antiquated, and we need to move and improve that. So that's another thing our planning department has been working on very diligently. And my next administration, we're committed to change that, take it to the council and get it approved so we are modernized in our planning division.
Judge Bissen, do you see the same level of improvement from the administration? Is it still a problem to get permits?
Well, anecdotally it is. I mean, I don't know the statistics. I couldn't tell you today how many permits are pending, how many were approved in the last month, in the last year, in the last 3 years or 4 years. Obviously, that's something that's within the administration's information to have that. But the fact that the public perceives that, I think, is very important. The public believes that these aren't being built, or they aren't being built quick enough. Now, I'm not putting all the blame on one department or the other, because I don't know if that's the reason. But maybe we need to be more efficient in the way we do permitting, in terms of having different phases of permitting. If you're coming in for a brand new development, you go into a certain line. If you're here just adding on addition, you go to a certain line. I'm not sure if everybody has to stand in the same line for any permit, or if we can be more efficient in where people can come for their service.
Here's another question that has come in from a viewer anonymously, though. How do you control B&Bs and short-term rentals? I remember hearing quite a striking figure of how many short-term rentals there are on Maui. That there's whole, I won't say subdivisions, but there's whole developments that are almost all short-term rentals. Is that something that needs to be addressed?
Absolutely, and we have been addressing. Recently, we signed about a year and a half ago an agreement with Airbnb and Expedia to take off all these illegal rentals, that short-term rentals that were online. They took off something like 1,800 so far. And we have monitors now, and we have enforcement people that constantly go back in to check this out. So we've reduced a tremendous amount of of illegal vacation rentals. And what the council has been doing is trying to limit the number of short-term rentals in our residence area.
The legal ones.
Illegal, and making sure that the legal ones that we only put in the numbers. When I was on council, we decided to put 400 in the entire island of Maui, 400 legal short-term rentals, B&Bs, and that's it. But we were up to like 25 to 3,000, and we've cut that down tremendously, and we're constantly working at it. And I want to thank our workforce, our people that have been monitoring this.
Let me ask you, how many legal ones do you have?
We figure right now probably about 500 to 600 that we know of.
That's all?
Yeah, that's all we have left now, and we constantly, now remember, these are the ones we know of. We're constantly going back in and checking the web pages, because that's how they get the word out, through the web. So we have different enforcement group that does that. They're out there 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, sometimes 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. We go different times to see who's doing what.
Do you think it's sufficient, or would you agree with that number? Do you have a sense of how many are out there, and is it a problem on Maui?
I think you asked how many legal ones there were, and I think the answer you got was the illegal ones. But I think for what we know the council has tried to do is limit the number of vacation rentals that can be on different islands in Maui, Molokai, and Lanai. There's a cap on how many there can be. But the reason this is an important topic is because when there are illegal vacation rentals, they impact the resources, the infrastructure, and just the quality of life for people that live in those neighborhoods, number one. Number two is that people are supposed to pay taxes and give notice and pay their fair share. They're making an income off of a business, and they're supposed to pay that, and that's not happening when it's illegal. And so I know there's been a crackdown throughout the state of Hawaii, not just on Maui, trying to lessen that number. But I think steps are being taken to, again, address that and reduce that. There are legitimate ones that are being run. People make their living off of that. People, our own residents, that's their income, and that's how they do it. So not to cast, all of them in the same category. It's the illegal versus the legal. And when we talk about illegal, those can be converted to long-term rentals. I mean, they don't get shut down and closed down. They just have to change from being a short-term rental to become a long-term rental.
What other, that's another regulating over tourism. Do you agree that there is a sense that there are too many visitors on Maui and that you need to take steps to reduce the amount of accommodations that are there? Do you agree with that?
I agree that there are times where there are too many tourists on the islands. Now, we all understand tourism is our main economic driver, but at the same time, it also taxes our infrastructure and, again, our quality of life, as I mentioned earlier. And so I think for when the visitors impact the residents and the kama'aina, that's when people have that sense that there's no room at the beach, the roads are crowded, the areas that are normally where locals go to are getting overrun by visitors. And so I feel that when we address this issue, there is a Maui Nui destination plan, one for Maui, Molokai, and Lanai, and stakeholders were brought together. They addressed this issue again, you kind of touched on this earlier about the kinds of tourists we want to attract.
But let me just try to get more specific. Is there a specific thing that you think would be the most effective way of preventing tourists from coming?
From coming? I don't know that we can.
From staying there.
Yes. I think what we're doing now, and it's been done throughout the state, is limiting activities. For example, you need a reservation to go to Haleakala National Park. You just can't go there at any time. You got to make your reservation if you're a visitor, excuse me. So I think limiting tourist-related activities is probably the quickest way or the most effective way to limit them actually coming to our island.
Mayor, do you feel that way too, that there's sometimes too many, or does it just seem like there's too many? And what kind of things have you done and will you do to manage that?
Well, first of all, you're right. There are times when there are too many. The hospitality has been good to Maui, but too much of a good thing is beginning to resonate. So what we've done is we've also worked with the state and other entities like the national parks and made reservations for Napa Napa and Haleakala now by Kipahulu, so that people know that they're full. You cannot come. There's no space for you. The other thing is making sure that the county itself, with Park Maui and others, we start developing where our residents have that freedom to come and have parking at our beach parks, so that the visitor has to pay and our residents will be free. And that way they understand. One of the things I first instituted when I came in 2019 was Sundays and holidays, no commercial activities in our beach parks, so that you could go to the beach park and not have surfboards and scuba gear and windsurfing all laying all over the park and you've got to traverse it. The parks are for our people, and I believe we got to continue to work on that to make sure our people, our residents, have that ability to enjoy what they work so hard to build.
I want to move along based on what our viewers are asking, and I was going to go there anyway, but Galen via Facebook said, don't forget Maui County includes Lanai and Molokai. Judge Bissen, what do you think, when you talk to people on those islands, what are they asking for from the county that they don't have now?
Mokulele Airlines. They want there to be more accommodations for schedules or numbers of flights. Now, we know that that's not something that's totally within the control of the county of Maui, but to answer your question, that's probably the first. And earlier I did mention the Maui Nui Destination Plan has one for each of the three islands, Molokai and Lanai as well. And so we either refer to our county as Maui Nui or Maui County, which is inclusive of all of those. But when you talk to residents on Lanai and you talk to residents on Molokai, that's the first thing they ask you before they, they understand once you explain to them that that's either the Department of Transportation or the federal government,
the airlines themselves.
The airlines themselves. But what they want to know is how can the county assist in having more flights so that can accommodate not just that, but the prices. There's very little competition. We no longer have the Molokai ferry. Of course, the Lahaina has its expeditions. They have that alternative to the airlines, but Molokai, so if we could offer more.
Is there any thought that you have about how you could do that? I mean, there's so many jurisdictions beyond the county.
To have that discussion?
Or get another airline to come.
Yeah, I think it's going to take building those relationships and having those meetings, not just with the state or the Department of Transportation or the governor, but certainly with the airlines coming to the table and expressing the needs and the concerns of those residents.
Let me, Victorino, let's talk specifically about the airline situation first, and then I'll ask you the same question about what you're hearing from those airlines. Are you
the airlines, pretty much the same thing, that the airlines, especially for Molokai, is so acute because they only have Mokulele. They have no alternatives. On Lanai, they have Mokulele. They also, Larry Ellison has his own private planes. He brings his guests in, and they sometimes can utilize that. And they have the ferry from Manele Harbor down to Lahaina. So that helps. But even them are struggling. The struggle with now is we are working with Brian Schatz, Senator Brian Schatz and others to look for programs that we can make Molokai essential and make it under the essential program that this is the only means of transportation in and out, so we can get not only federal funds, but we can get the airlines to up their ante as far as coming in, because they'll be subsidized by the federal government.
Wasn't it under that distinction before?
HANA has it, not Molokai, and I'm working on that right now. And so with the Department of Transportation, Federal Department of Transportation, FAA, and the airlines, we're now talking about that and seeing what we can do in the very near future.
So Kevin via Facebook asks, will there be any new, also the smaller islands, new county job openings? Is county jobs or county jobs? But anyway, any new county job openings for Molokai, Lanai, or Maui? I mean, do you have jobs on those islands that need to be filled? I mean, is there work out there?
Well, I'm surprised at that question because absolutely. We have a shortage of county employees in many segments of our county departments. And so we found that just like the private sector, there's a huge shortage of people wanting to take on jobs. These millennials are a little different and they're not looking for long-term. So, some of the long-term benefits we offer now have to change, and we are also looking at incentives and other programs that we can attract county workers or workers from our community to work here. Like for some of our departments, we're short not only pipe fitters and pipe layers, we are short of engineers and other crucial personnel that right now we're having a challenge. But that's universal. Hotels, I know in Oahu, all the state, and across the nation is really an acute situation.
Let me take it to Judge Bissen. On Honolulu, we just talked about how it's taking 6 months to hire someone in Honolulu. Is there any setback or any barrier like that for Maui County? Like, does it take a long time to get hired at Maui County? Is that why people may not take those jobs?
For a county job? Well, I'll tell you right now, we have 100 vacancies in the Maui Police Department. That's just for police officers, and police officers serve on Lanai and Molokai, as well as Maui. Radio transmission officers or dispatchers, they're also in need. I would agree that there are likely openings on each of the islands, all 3 islands, for county jobs and any other jobs that people are looking for, whether it's visitor industry, other types of work. So the answer to, I think you said his name was Kevin, would be yes, there are jobs available. As far as whether it would take 6 months to fill, I would doubt that it would be 6 months probationary period. That would probably be standard.
What's it taking now, Mayor, to onboard someone in the county?
In most of the jobs, probably between 2 to 3 weeks, depending on drug tests and other procedures that they have to go through, the different background checks, depending on your job also.
Okay.
And so there's variables in all of this. So I cannot say specifically. Some may take 2 or 3 months. Some are much quicker.
So for those who don't want to work for the government, are there enough jobs, enough diverse jobs on, especially on those smaller islands?
Absolutely. All the islands right now, you could probably find a job walking into any resort, any area, farming. I know right now our agricultural industry is struggling to get enough workers to get their agricultural.
Do those jobs pay enough to live on Maui?
Well, that's the other challenge. Sometimes livable wages are not there, and that's something we gotta keep working at.
I know some of our farmers are providing housing for their workers that come to Maui to work. Having spoken with the farmers, I believe that they've had to offer that as an incentive to separate themselves from other employers. So I think any employer on Maui, Molokai or Lanai, that wants to attract employees, if they could provide them some sort of housing, short-term rental, whatever it would be, I think they would find, and when I say short-term, I don't mean short-term vacation, but to give them, even for a probationary period, give them some housing before they can find their own housing, they would be a very attractive employer, I think, to our residents.
2 questions, one anonymous, one Barbara from Kihei, asking about healthcare and the healthcare situation right now. Judge Bissen, how would you describe the healthcare situation, particularly when it comes to the hospital care on Maui, and what do you think needs to happen?
It really depends who you ask. But I know, being the product of the hospital, having been a patient there, that they've had excellent care. Now, this would have been some years ago, but I can tell you that the hospital, again, from firsthand experience, has done a really good job. And by disclosure, my wife at one time did work for the hospital before it was taken over by its new entity, Kaiser. But I think the sense people have is that we do have adequate services, but there's always been the need for a request for a West Maui, at least urgent care, if not a full-fledged hospital. And the reason I say it that way is we're having trouble filling our main hospital with nurses and doctors and staff. So before we take on another, I think we just want to make sure that we can accommodate the staffing of that. But certainly, I think our medical care is very good on Maui.
Your feeling about it?
I would say I agree with that, and I also say that under my administration, we have started to build and donate lots to both the Hospital Foundation and Nahale on Maui to build for our essential workers like police, fire, teachers. We've got a number of organizations that we take care of. We take care of the 80% and down below of that, of the AMI, the average medium income. We do a pretty good job taking care of them. What we're not taking care of, what I call the middle class, those essential workers, those who really make Maui Nui, Maui Nui. And that's what, like teachers, doctors, lawyers, all these people that
I'm sorry,
really...
I'm losing track of what you're saying. You're saying that the health care for those folks is not as good?
No.
I'm talking about health care.
Well, the health care is okay, but we are critically short of doctors, especially psychiatric is really short on Maui. We do not have a mental health system for our children.
Oh, I see.
So all of that is equated to housing. If they
Okay.
cannot afford to live there, they're not coming.
That's what I think I hear both of you saying.
Yes.
Yeah. So, it's interesting. So, I'm going to have to try and think of a couple of things where you guys disagree with each other, because big picture-wise, you guys are agreeing a lot. So, let me just, I understand that the access deer issue, which is an incredibly crazy issue on your guys' county, is something that you guys have different theories about. Let me start with you, Judge Bissen. What's your approach to dealing with the access deer problem? I understand from some of the more recent reporting that you actually discussed complete eradication of that population.
Yeah, I think that was misreported, Daryl. Thank you for the opportunity to clarify that. We were talking about the watershed in particular with that issue. If anyone goes back and hears what I've said starting from January, and I'm glad that the mayor agrees with this now, that the access deer can be a tremendous industry for us. We've talked about mobile slaughterhouses. We've talked about workforce development. We've talked about building, processing, and marketing. We want that meat to find its way to the restaurants, to the stores, and to deliver. We have over 60,000, an estimated 65,000 head. A manageable herd is about 20,000. What I was proposing is how we manage that herd in our watersheds, because in our watersheds, it's critical. Also near our airport, I mean, there are eradication hunts, and that's what they're called, for certain areas of the island and certain types of threats that are made by these. Now, these affect ranchers, they affect farmers, they affect motorists, and so this is, it's a very critical thing, and I've been talking about this since the start of the campaign, that we should obviously turn this into an industry. The Maui Humane Society, their number one expenditure is dog food. People, hunters, use deer for dog food as well. So there's many uses of this product, we know. But what I was stressing, there was a little clip that you might have been talking about, is we can't let them get to our watershed.
No,
now there's talk that they're already in our watershed, but we have to manage that.
Because the watershed, the deer end up destroying
they denude the
foliage,
forest,
and then you have all kinds of
That's right.
runoff and so on. Okay.
Yes.
Mayor, do you guys have a difference on this one?
Well, yes, in the sense that, I've been saying for years to make this an industry, and we've been working towards that. Mobile slaughterhouses. We have one on Molokai and 2 more coming into Maui County. The pandemic slowed us down, but didn't stop us. The deer were continuing. We went to severe droughts that at one point the herds were literally dropping dead in Molokai and on Maui, and we had to take action in this area. We got grants and we got some aid from the state to take care of this issue of making food out of it, feeding our needy food bank in all these other areas, and making it a business. Those who want to make it a business, now we're getting close to doing it, and I thank my opponent for recognizing the fact that I've been doing this and that I've continued to promote this for many years.
Okay, I think that we're done with that. One of the things I wanted to ask you about, both of you, is corruption. Now, there was the biggest bribery scandal practically in the history of the state happened on Maui. It was before your administration. The environmental director, Stuart Stant, was admitted taking millions of dollars from Milton Choi, the wastewater businessman. What, in your mind, looking back, again, it wasn't your administration, what do you think allowed something like that to happen for so long before someone caught it?
Unfortunately, sometimes people start out by doing something little to help somebody and little more, and it gets out of hand. What has happened, and it's happened not only in Maui, but it's happened here in Oahu and all over the state and all over the nation. Sometimes people lose sight of what their morals are and what they should and should not be doing. And sole sourcing is one of the things that creates this. When you have a product that nobody else has and you sell it to the county or to the state and everything goes through there. Big Island had theirs with the housing. But it doesn't make a difference. What you need to do is make people accountable. And I think checking like now, what we've done is we've gone through all the records to see what else has occurred since we took office, because there was equipment that was sold that's still being utilized, and we can now go directly. I've changed from going from anybody else but directly to the manufacturer to make sure there is no underhanded activities. But corruption is really easily taken into because somebody thinks it's easy. Somebody's not paying attention. We had P cards at one time was another issue. And I have been really monitoring our P cards. I have a P card that's been used 3 times in my 4 years. I don't use it. And because I really feel that we've got to protect the public's trust in government. And this is very important. And for our administration, we've worked really hard to do that.
Judge, as a judge, you saw how the criminal mentality works.
Correct.
I think that what the mayor said is correct. It usually starts with the little things and then it barrel rolls into the bigger things. What do you think is the key to preventing corruption in a county government?
Well, I think it's punishment. I think it's oversight, or in this case, the lack of oversight. You mentioned the judge. I was also a prosecutor for 15 years, and I'm the only person who ran in this race who's ever handled corruption matters and understands how those cases work. But to start with, it's part of it is the hiring process. Part of it is the oversight process. And, the issue of sole source bidding is ripe for there to be that lack of oversight. And I think we need to put in place regular monitoring, not giving somebody a contract and then just letting it go. Because what also happens in sole source is when they amend their budget, or when they do a
Change order.
change order. That's the word I was thinking of. When they do a change order, and that's not even covering the initial bid that was put on that, and that's what really makes those dangerous. But we know this, and yet it's allowed to happen. So I think when, as a judge, what you look at is deterrence. You look at punishment. You look at making examples of people to see, well, this is what will happen. And, a lot of people are sitting up right now, whether they're at the state legislature, whether they're at county government. Everybody's looking over their shoulder, and not only are they wondering how to prevent this, they're wondering, who have I spoken to? What have I said to somebody? Because now you don't know who's working for the investigative side of this. People recording people getting information. There are a lot of nervous people that come up when these things are exposed.
And Daryl, I think another thing that I think we need to continue to do and to increase is audits of the departments. A steady, consistent audit of every department every other year or every 3 years or whatever it might be, to make sure not only to catch wrongdoing, to make sure efficiencies are there, that they're doing it for the people of Maui County and they're doing it right.
So now you got to get housing for auditors.
Yes.
That's well, everything's housing, right?
Right.
Yeah, I agree with you, Daryl.
If people apply to be auditors.
Yeah.
Well, the smart kids figured that out early. Okay, this is a major issue that I appreciate a viewer brought this in. How do you plan to address coastal erosion on, obviously on Oahu, it's become a huge issue. I know on Maui you're seeing hardening around some resorts, so you're seeing erosion that's threatening highways and so on and so on. Let me try to get a little specific though. Everybody talks about it. Have you guys already built into your codes and your permitting process an assumption of sea level rise to a certain level, or, are people still building too close to the seashore?
Well, we're working on that right now because we realize coastal erosion and sea level rise is a reality. It's coming. It's part of climate change. And so that's why I said about revamping our planning department and the rules there. The council and I have worked on some of these issues, managed retreat and looking at maybe exchanging lands. Some of our council members have said, let's move some of these properties back. I agree with them because there may be no other option. However, we need to look at what I call replenishment of our sand dunes and our sand, like they did in Waikiki and other places. It does mitigate some of that. Groins is another, but not hardening the shoreline, because what it does, it pushes the tidal action off the way and it erodes even further other properties abutting that.
What happens on Oahu, and I'll follow up with you, Judge, on this also, is that people are literally buying houses that are already threatened by the ocean, and then when the ocean starts to take them, they're screaming for help from the government. Do you believe that homes like that should just be allowed, either forced to move off at their own costs, or just allowed to be abandoned?
Well, if you can move the house, which we've seen in some cases, people have spent money moving it to another location, I would be really amenable to helping them in that area. In some cases, may not be possible, and exchanging that and moving that back, like some of the council members and I have talked about, is another option. Moving where you have to where it is. But a lot of the coastal erosion in Maui is our resort areas, and that becomes a more tricky because you can't move a hotel back. You may be able to move a home, a house, a property like that, but you can't move a hotel. And so there's other areas that we have to start looking at what we can do. When they were built, they weren't threatened by coastal erosion. None of us saw this coming, or if we did, we weren't really prepared for it.
I'll answer your question in reverse, and I'm also glad that the mayor has brought up some of the ideas we proposed, which was to do land swaps with Kama'aina families that have coastal homes and swapping with them perhaps county lands that are Mauka. But I think when someone buys a home that they know is in harm's way, there's, the term in the law is an assumption of risk. If you decide you're going to do that on your own, I think there's a certain risk that you accept, and then you become responsible for that. However, there are those long-time families that are impacted by this, and we should obviously consider. Now, if they don't accept the offer to swap their land, then that's their choice to do so. But what we need to be concerned about is the infrastructure and any danger that poses to our environment, like our ocean and, of course, our reef and our sea life, because there is infrastructure that's impacted by this. So whether there's sewer lines or other lines, that I think is the county's responsibility. Whether or not a hotel decides that they're gonna try to wait it out or whatever they're gonna do, I think that's for them. But families, businesses that are small family businesses, those are the ones that we should be considering helping if we can. But again, the whole issue of managed retreat is not unique to Hawaii. All coastal cities are talking about this.
Let me ask, and I'll start with the mayor on this. Is there enough money, period, to do what you're going to have to do for the county infrastructure, for the roads and sewers and waste runoff and all that other stuff? Is there enough money for you to back off the shoreline to the degree that you have, or to do the kind of things you're talking about, protecting existing structures?
Well, one of the things we already started, and with the council, and I agree with them, is putting 20% of our transient accommodation tax collections in a special fund for this managed retreat. That's just a starting point. We may have to look at fees and taxes and different issues that how we're going to pay for this managed retreat. We were really fortunate. We have good partners like the federal government who's put in $95 million to move Honopi'ilani Highway from where Olowalo and Okumihami, where it is, up a half a mile so that we will take that out of the tidal zones. That's one of many. In Napili, we're working on that also as a county and with the state government to move the road up or let it fall in the ocean and protect the housing that's in there. So there's many programs that are out there, but enough money, well, it's going to take generations to take care of some of this. But more importantly, if we don't start today, it'll only be worse tomorrow. And I have great-grandchildren that I have to make sure they have a future here in Maui County.
And Daryl, if we're going to talk about money being spent, now would be the time to do it. Yesterday, this should have been done yesterday, a lot of this stuff that's happening. But the federal government, through the infrastructure bill, gave money for roads and harbors and bridges. Well, they also gave money for infrastructure. So some of the things we're talking about tonight, water, sewer, roads, there is money that's available now. It's a one-time money drop that we need to take advantage of in whatever ways. We need to be doing our share of applying for that, receiving that, and of course applying it.
So I did get a question from another viewer. How will you manage the county budget as many people worry about a recession? What do you see, Judge, ahead for the county of Maui and its budget and its various revenue streams?
So our budget increased by over $400 million in just 4 years. And for the public to see this now, they're wondering, well, who's going to pay for this?
How big a percentage increase is that?
Well, it was $800 million.
So it's a 50% increase.
Absolutely. It went from $800 million to 1.2, 1.17. And so for the public, their concern is going to be that, are we mortgaging our children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren's future later by sticking them with the bill now? Now, some of these things are needed, no question about it. We should take care of our residents, take care of our people, take care of our aina to the best that we can. But to answer your question, that how we're going to pay for that in the future is going to be, we're going to send it to the next generation.
Do you feel like the Maui County residents are overtaxed by the county?
I think our tax rates are competitive with the rest of the state.
Fact of the matter, our tax rates are the lowest in the state for our residents, the owner-occupant, the resident of their property, and their first rental. So we've done that. We also give a $200,000 deduction off the top for any resident that lives on Maui, that files taxes, that works on Maui, okay? So we have that already, Daryl. So we take care of our residents. There may be changes coming down the line, but a lot of it, the council has been taking from our biggest is our hospitality industry. 52% of all our revenue comes from that pot only. Then we have the TAT, which now is going to bring in another 60 plus million instead of the 23 million we were getting from the state. There's other pots of money, and of course, my colleague there has said that the federal one-time drop, that's why a lot of this money. And I agree, this is what I know we had to do. That's why the $1 billion. And it went from 800,000 to 1.1 billion. That's 300 million, not 400. I don't know how we do math, but that's okay. But really, the idea right now is we have to not be kicking the can down the road and take appropriate action now.
So I've got several questions about various specific roads and trails and so on. And overall, what is the situation, Mayor, with the capacity of your roads and the safety of your roads on Maui? I mean, I know there have been more fatalities and so on. It's getting more dangerous. I mean, is that a big issue for you?
Absolutely. And, we're having more fatalities, primarily because if you look at it, more have been impaired driving and speeding, okay? And our police force, in fact, I just met with the chief this morning, and we had a good discussion about that. And he has tried to put checkpoints and other mitigating areas, and we've increased our challenge in making sure we catch these people before they hurt somebody. But like anything else, we are short 100 officers. We are working hard with retention bonuses and other areas that we can increase our force, retain what we have, and not lose them to other counties or other states. So that's another big area. The other area that we're working hard on is road improvements. We have been doing a great job trying to improve our roads by making them much safer. Reducing, like on Piilani Highway, we reduced the speed limit from 45 to 35 along Piilani. Yet people still, I swear, I don't see anybody doing 35 miles an hour going to. So what it is, when you put these little speed traps and you sit there and they give 10, 12 tickets, although the problem is many tickets go uncollected, that's a real challenge, but that's something that the state handles, not the county. We need to continue to enforce, but we need more police officers, and we are really working hard with our recruitment program that we can recruit. But we got to make sure the job, housing, again, I go back to housing for all of this. If we don't build it, they won't stay.
The roads that we're talking about that are most impacted, for that question I can tell you, is Hana Highway. And it's between Kahului and Hanatown. And that road is overused and stressed. And that's the road that we need to control. We need to control that by having set times that visitors can go on that road and set times that are for residents only. So people can come out and go to work. I mean, that's a 2-hour drive. People have to go, and that's one way. And so it's making it worse by having it clogged by folks who are on vacation. They want to take pictures. They want to take pictures of all the bridges, every single one they're going to go through, and people are trying to get to work. So we need to better manage that by the times. We offer times that people can go in and come out. We also need to consider putting toll booths on that road. Now, there are issues that come up with that, but that's not insurmountable. If the state took over that road, toll booths could go back on that, could go on those roads. We could also consider managing the way tourists go and view Hana.
Let me just get a real quick answer from you on what Mayor Victorino was saying about the safety of the highway, the police, DUI, traffic fatalities, just very briefly.
Well, I know the state, the police and the prosecutors put in a motor vehicle collision and homicide group. The police already had one, the prosecutors dedicated. That might have been a grant position that they created. So I know that was designed to try to address, when it comes to prevention, most of that is awareness and education. People on the side of the road telling people, slow down, don't drink and drive. People are impacted by that. Obviously, it's visceral, and they know the family member, somebody. So, that's how to do it. Education, awareness, and of course, enforcement. Not just with police, but also with the liquor commissioners who can go to the bars where people come out of and also enforce those laws there.
Okay, I just got a 2-minute warning, gentlemen. So what I want to do is
let me really quickly
really,
say that.
15 seconds?
15 seconds. Hana Highway is not the most deadliest highway. Haleakala is one of the worst ones, and it doesn't have to do anything with traffic. It's the speed that goes there because of the 4 lanes.
Okay, so what I'd like to do, like I said, you guys have got a lot of similarities. please tell me, each of you, how you would be a different mayor than the other one. Why don't you go ahead,
Sure.
Judge Bissen first, in about a minute.
You know, for me, thousands of people have come through my courtroom, and they have seen the way I handled my courtroom with respect, with fairness, with judgment that's used, and I will run the county of Maui the exact same way. We've also started collective kuleana groups. We're the only candidate that's gone to every community since the primary, and even now in the general, we're still going there. And we're getting ideas and views from the actual residents. So it's a collaborative form of trying to bring all these ideas from our citizens to our county.
I want to give you, Mayor.
Well, the same thing, working with respect and collaboration. I've built very many good working relationships with not only with the general public, but with other agencies, nonprofits, state, federal. Partnerships that we've been able to build, private-public partnerships, have worked real well, and now it's starting to pay off. As your mayor, I've been honored to do, through the worst time of our lifetime, work through that and make sure that we're all in a better place. The next 4 years, we can make all these other improvements because hopefully COVID's behind of us. Not gone, but behind of us. And we need to continue to work with respect and love. And I love this community. I've given 45 years of my life, and I'll never give up on our people of Maui County.
Okay, I want to thank both of our guests today, Maui Mayor candidates Richard Bissen and Mike Victorino. Next week on Insights, we feature candidates for the at-large trustee for the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. Please join us then. I'm Daryl Huff for Insights on PBS Hawaii. Aloha.